justice for all.
Okay, stand in a second. I am so excited to be here today because Governor DeSantis not only fought for our children during COVID, now he is fighting for the whole country. And people sometimes ask me if I have hope for the future. And when I look at groups like Moms for Liberty and the Reaganites and the York County GOP and Mamas for DeSantis, I do have hope because I see people like you guys every day standing up for what's right and getting it done. So without further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce you guys one of our local fighters for what is right and what is true, Representative Brandon Guffey.
A lot larger crowd in here than it is outside, that's for sure. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. You know, there's many things going on, but y'all have chosen to come out here and hear the next president of the United States speak here locally. Being born and raised in York County, I can tell you there's not a better group of patriots in the entire state of South Carolina. We go down there, we meet with reps all across the state, but nothing is like coming back home, feeling the love, feeling the support. I believe a lot of it comes from our Christian values that we were raised with. And so that I am very thankful. I'm thankful to call York County home. I've only spent 1 year in the legislature, but I can tell you it's been a learning experience, should I say, so far. But let me tell you why I am supporting Governor DeSantis in his bid. First of all, he is the only person on the ballot that has served his country. We have moved away from that. You know, we heard the applause a minute ago talking about our veterans. Governor DeSantis is the first president in 30 years that's actually entered during combat time to serve his country. You go to Yale, you go to Harvard, and then you decide to join the military because your country needs you. That's someone that really knows what service is about. That's someone that actually understands what it means to sacrifice for their country. I had to make some notes here. I apologize. I'm used to having a podium. Didn't realize that I wouldn't have one. But the other reason that I'm supporting Governor DeSantis is any of you that know me know that I'm a big proponent of term limits. I believe that the reason I support term limits is because I believe that we've got to have the next generation step up and lead. Just as we raise our children to be able to provide for themselves. You can't keep them in the home forever and then expect them to be able to fend for themselves. We need the same thing in our political offices. And the problem is the last election, our average age in not South Carolina, but in the United States is 39 years of age. Our last election had 2 men that are almost twice the age of the average citizen in the United States. I'm not speaking ill about either candidate. Well, I'm not speaking ill about the Republican candidate. But in order to have your pulse on this country, I believe that you've got to have that new generation step up. Governor DeSantis is that person. Also, the reason that I am supporting him, for those of you that know me and know my story from last year, I lost my 17-year-old son, Gavin, to a crime called sextortion. And my life's mission now is protecting children. There's not a... There's not another candidate on the ballot that has the resume that Governor DeSantis has whenever it comes to fighting and standing up for children. He's got 3 children of his own. I trust that whenever he's making a decision, he's doing what's best for his children, and that makes me comfortable in knowing that he's going to do what's best for my children. So, in closing, we're here today because we know it's time for somebody with character, resolve, and that does not quit to lead this country. We know it's time for a new generation to lead. And we all know we want a president that has a proven track record from the front and fighting, and that will never back down. So if you would all help me join the future President of the United States, Ron DeSantis.
Hello, South Carolina. Thank you, Brandon. Are you ready to help me send Joe Biden back to his basement in Delaware? Do you believe me when I tell you my White House will be cocaine-free? Y'all have a seat. We're going to chat. I've been in 2 different states. We started in Florida. We went to Virginia. I spoke at the Christians United for Israel celebration, and now I'm here in South Carolina for the second stop of the day. Joe Biden, I think he's been in 2 different states today, too, the states of confusion and disorientation, but just leave that alone. Have you heard Biden? He will say when it comes to children, they're not your children, they're all of our children. They're all of our children. And, you know, first of all, as a dad of 6, a 5, and a 3-year-old, they're not my children, are not his children, I can tell you that. But when he's sitting here talking about all of our children, I have something to say to him. Why don't you focus on spending more time with your granddaughter in Arkansas, or at least acknowledge she exists? Before you worry about our children. And they shouldn't be worrying about our children either. We don't want you indoctrinating our children. Leave our kids alone. And we've got to get serious about reestablishing some fundamental truths in this country. Parents have the fundamental right to direct the education and upbringing of their kids. And ideally, that should mean nationwide, just like we have in Florida, that you have, for every parent, universal school choice. You can send them to whatever school you want to. Scholarship to go to private, charter school, school district, you name it. That's a ticket to success. But it also means that parents have a right to know what curriculum is being used in their kids' schools and what's being taught to their kids. And the left opposes things like curriculum transparency. Why? Because they know if the parents are involved, the parents represent an impediment to them using the schools for indoctrination. And so they want to keep the parents out. You hear some of these people saying, oh, parents, they're not qualified to know and all this stuff. It's nonsense, but it's because they believe that the schools are basically their ideological playpens where they can do whatever they want. And that doesn't work with me. We want education, not indoctrination. So you have a right in Florida now to inspect the curriculum. And what have parents done? Unfortunately, parents have had to blow the whistle on some inappropriate material. You'll end up seeing pornographic material in some of the school libraries. And these are like 5th grade kids, 6th grade kids. And so they blow the whistle on it. And I know y'all are dealing with this here, and I hope they stand up on the side of parents' rights and decency and not allow this type of material for these very young kids. It's wrong. They're trying to indoctrinate, and it's wrong. So we have had folks blow the whistle. Now, the media will say that if you take out a pornographic book from a 4th grade classroom, that somehow that's banning books. First of all, in Florida, you can get whatever book you want as an adult, but there's a time and a place for some of this stuff. You know, if you want adult material, the proper place for that is not a 4th grader's classroom, okay? If you want adult material, go look at Hunter Biden's laptop for all I care. but keep it away from our kids. So we understand that. And I actually did an event in Florida when some of the hysteria over this was going on, and we called it Exposing the Book Ban Hoax, because it is a hoax. But before I said anything or the parents said anything, we just played on the screen images of what the parents actually objected to. The local news who were covering the press conference had to cut their feed. They said it was too graphic to air on TV. Well, if it's too graphic for the 6 o'clock news, how's it okay for a 10-year-old school child? We also need to ensure that education means learning the basics. We have done things in Florida, and I think we need to do it across the country, like eliminate critical race theory from our K through 12 schools. We're not teaching kids to hate our country or to hate each other with your tax dollars. It is wrong. We also have taken a stand in Florida, and others have, and we need to do it nationally, against injecting things like gender ideology and transgenderism in the school curriculum. It is wrong to tell a second grader that they may have been born in the wrong body or that their gender is a choice. That is wrong. Parents do not want that. And in Florida, when we stood up for parents and said we're not going to have that in our schools, the media had a spasm, the left had a spasm. But you know, the parents, Republican, Independent, and many Democrats said, we were right on this. They want to know that they send their kids to school and they're going to be taught the normal things, not have an agenda imposed on them. Now, the parents liked it. There happened to be a business in Central Florida that some of y'all may have heard of that didn't like it too much. Some of y'all may have visited this business. They got rides, and so Disney came out against it and was fighting us on this. And, you know, the thing about Florida politics is for almost 60 years, anything Disney has wanted, they get. They basically had an iron grip on the legislature, very, very powerful when they threw their weight around on everything. And so when this was happening, people were saying, well, the governor is not going to be able to do this, parents' rights, because Disney objects. There's just no way you can stand up. They will steamroll and all this other stuff. And, you know, for most of Florida's modern history, that may have been true. But it isn't true with this governor. We stood up for the people of our state. We're not subcontracting out to woke corporations based in California. And I don't care what people say. I have a lot of these Republicans, they are attacking me and siding with Disney. I oppose the sexualization of children. We will fight anybody seeking to rob them of their innocence, and on those principles, we are not going to compromise. So you can expect with me a new era for the rights of parents in this country and a new focus on true education for our youth in this country. And, you know, we focus a lot in K-12. It is important. In Florida, we're actually doing stuff for higher education. Now in Florida, because of our efforts, all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go for poor performance. We are also the first state in the country to eliminate DEI from our public universities, and we need to do this nationwide. We actually had a little liberal arts school in Sarasota called New College, and I mean, it was like left of the left, like a commune, basically, and it's funded by tax dollars. And I'm just like, you know, why are we funding this if it's just ideological studies? So I put 7 conservative trustees on the board of trustees. They fired the president, hired a conservative president, eliminated gender ideology and CRT, and they rebranded the college as a classical liberal arts college like Hillsdale College in Michigan is. And They now have applications are at like a decade high of people wanting to come next year because parents around the country are seeing, oh, they're actually serious about making education be about the pursuit of truth again, not about imposing a leftist agenda on the students. Some of the professors who were there didn't like the direction, and so they've gone on to what they think may be greener pastures. And some people are like, oh my gosh, is this a brain drain coming out of those? And I'm just thinking to myself, if a professor of Marxist studies leaves the state of Florida, that's a win for Florida, not a loss for Florida. January 20th, 2025, when I take over, that's going to mark the end of Bidenomics. It's going to be done. We're throwing it out. And, all Biden is doing is he's trying to use the economy to pursue a leftist agenda. He's trying to empower a lot of elites in D.C. and some of these other places, and he's basically sticking everybody else with the bill. If you look at how much money since March of 2020 with the Fauci lockdowns and all that stuff, the borrowing, the spending, the printing of trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars is the reason why you're facing higher prices on everything. It's a government-induced economic problem. And it was done because they're very reckless. Look, if we could just print our way to prosperity, why not print 50 trillion or 100 trillion? I think we all know that eventually the bill comes due. So the bill has come due for average Americans in the form of these higher prices with the inflation that we've seen. They say inflation is slowing, but understand, it's still going up on top of all the other increases. It's not like it's that prices are going down. And so it's effectively an invisible tax that people in Washington have imposed on society. They're doing good in Washington. 7 of the 10 wealthiest counties in this country are suburbs of Washington, D.C. So they benefit with these policies. Some people that have all these assets benefit from these policies, but average people do not. And so we're going to get power out of Washington and bring power back to average Americans, small business people, who are actually make our country work again. And part of that is you have all this federal bureaucracy, these rules and regulations where they're trying to change behavior in this country. It hurts our ability to grow the economy. We're ripping those out on day one. We are not going to have things like the Green New Deal or any of that nonsense. We're going to make sure that we're standing for taxpayers and for small business people. We're also going to open up our own domestic energy production. We need to be energy independent. We need low gas prices. It's just so ridiculous. They say they have to do all this because of global warming, and yet China adds a new coal plant every week, and they're going to continue doing this. So none of the stuff Biden's doing, it's basically performative. They're using that as the reason to be able to enact policies they would want to enact anyways. They want to be able to control behavior. They want to socially engineer society. So we're going to open up all this stuff for exploration. We're going to build more pipelines. We're going to export more to Europe. All these things, it's going to be good for our economy. It's going to be good for people that need to use energy, good for businesses, and it is going to be good for our national security. So we're going to get that done. It's going to be very significant. I will be, I think, the first president since Ronald Reagan who will actually push back against the overspending of Congress. And the fact of the matter is, we can sit here and rightfully criticize Biden for his policies, and he deserves it. There's no question. But we don't have $32 trillion in debt only because of Democrats. I'm sorry to say, Republicans have spent, Republicans have borrowed, and we need to stop that. If we're the party of less government, then we actually need to show it. And if you look at our federal agencies, they have expanded by 50% since 2019. Do any of you feel 50% better off? Of course not. So we need a major reduction. Part of what we're going to do is really reduce the footprint of the overall federal workforce. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We need far fewer bureaucrats. You know, in Florida, we have the lowest percentage of state workers per capita in the country. Our state workforce, if you look at how much our state workforce costs in tax dollars to each Floridian, total state workforce is about $90 per Floridian. The national average is $208 to fund their state workforce. And in states like New York and California, I'm sure it's over $300. And yet, does Florida produce worse services than any of those other states? Of course not. So much of government is not necessary, and we can downsize. So we need to do that. We also, if we really want to have a good economy for the medium and long term, we have got to revamp how we think about education. We cannot say that the only way you can be successful is to go to college and get a 4-year degree. Because you know what? A lot of these degrees have not been worth the paper that they're printed on. You don't need zombie studies. You don't need some of these subjects. So what we've done in Florida, and I think what we need to do nationwide, is we need to increase the number of apprenticeships that are available. We're actually in middle schools now in Florida having programs where people can learn concrete skills. And when I became governor, we were producing like 600 truck drivers a year. Now we're doing 3,500 a year. And these jobs are jobs that pay well. You won't have to go into debt. And a lot of times you can parlay that into your own business, so there's a chance to be an entrepreneur. How many kids over my generation on, they sometimes are there for 6 years, they go $100,000 in debt, and then they have no real options when they get out, and they end up in a job they could have had at a high school. That's not good. And so, yes, there's good things about college. I'm not saying don't do it, but we just got to be honest. You're not any better than somebody else because you're going to a 4-year college, and you're not any worse than anybody else because you're because you're going with vocational. And a lot of the debt that's been racked up has been totally unnecessary. It's been debt that colleges have basically monopolized, and they make bigger administrative staffs, all this other stuff. This student debt they talk about, I don't think it's fair to say that a truck driver should have to pay the debt of somebody who got a degree in gender studies. I just don't think that's fair. But at the same time, I think these colleges and universities should be on the hook for this debt because they have an incentive for kids to go deeper in the debt. They don't have an incentive to offer the best programs. If they were responsible for guaranteeing the debts of the students, then they would change their curriculum. They would not be able to offer post-Marxist gender studies because that's not leading to anything. They would have to focus on things that matter. So we're going to make all the colleges and universities responsible for the student debt. I think it'll give some kids relief, but it'll do it appropriately for the people that really caused this. So we've got to do that. So Bidenomics will be out the door. We'll be able to grow this country much more robustly, and I look forward to doing that. I also look forward to restoring this country's sovereignty, particularly at our southern border. And we've heard a lot about this over the years. They talk about doing all this, and it's never quite gotten done. So on day one, we're going to declare it a national emergency. We're going to mobilize all available resources, including the U.S. military. Yes, we will actually build the border wall, which we need. And we've got massive open spaces down there, hundreds and hundreds of miles with no barrier at all. We'll do that. But we are going to do something that no president has been willing or able to do. We are going to hold the Mexican drug cartels accountable for what they are doing to this country. And honestly, it's humiliating as an American to go down to that border, which I've done many times, and to find out or be reminded that the Mexican drug cartels have more control of what's going on at our southern border than the United States government does. It's pathetic. And Biden has let this happen. And what has that meant for people throughout our country? It means tens of thousands of overdoses from the fentanyl that's being brought across the border. It means human trafficking in terms of minors being trafficked across the southern border. It has caused massive amounts of carnage because we don't have the capability or the will to be able to enforce our border. So what I've said is this, because there's obviously massive open spaces where there's no barriers or no wall. There are parts where there's a wall, and I was down in Arizona recently, and I was going down there, and there's big steel beams. I see these guys at the foot of this thing doing work on it. I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, we're fixing the hole. I'm like, the hole? What happened? Cartels cut through the border wall, and they bring in product, and nobody stops them. So we're going to have rules of engagement in place. We're going to have Border Patrol out there, military out there. If cartels are breaking through our wall to try to smuggle in drugs, that's going to be the last thing they do, because they're going to end up stone cold dead by trying to do that. I am sick of our country being invaded, and we are going to fight back. And I think it's just a matter of ensuring that we're a free and prosperous country. Another threat to freedom that people have started to talk about, and we're one of the only state maybe to take action, is one of the things they want to do to this country is they want to impose something called the central bank digital currency. Have you guys heard about this? So basically what they want to do, they want to force us into a cashless society. They want to eliminate cryptocurrency, and they want the sole form of legal tender to be this digital currency that is controlled by the Federal Reserve. And the Fed has actually publicly said, well, we don't have one yet. We may do it, but we'll consult with Congress and the executive. Ideally, we'd even get a law passed. So they're basically saying they may not have to get a law passed. That's not the way the Constitution works. Congress would have to authorize that. I don't think they would authorize it because I think there's problems. But in Florida, we saw this as something that was a potential threat. So we actually enacted legislation banning the use of central bank digital currency in the state of Florida. So Biden has them studying this. I definitely think this is something that they want to do. And why is this a problem? Well, when all the transactions are effectively controlled by a central entity, they are going to use that to impose a social credit system. They are going, and you even have people like the World Economic Forum, all these elites, they're already salivating. They're saying things like, if you have this, then you can police purchases like ammunition and fuel and all the things that they don't want you to be able to purchase. And if you think that we could go to a central bank digital currency and they would not abuse it or do things like that, then I've got oceanfront property in Arizona I'd like to sell you. So come talk to me about it. So it's a major threat to freedom. It's a major threat to liberty. And it's something that we should be concerned about. The good news about this is you elect me as president on January 20th, 2025, CBDC dies in the United States of America. It'll be dead. And part of, I think, what we have to deal with in this country is the threats to our freedom are very, very diverse now. It used to be if you just kept government in its place, then default you would be free. And not obviously there's threats from government, don't get me wrong. I mean, not in Florida, but nationally and some other states, 100%. But I think what's happened is you've had all these institutions be infected by things like woke ideology. And so you have big businesses, you have universities, you have all these things up and down the line that are operating to try to impose an agenda on society. That's why they're doing things like ESG, which is a total fraud, but it gives them a license to use economic power to try to advance an agenda that they could not get enacted in the ballot box through elections. Because if you say you want to take away people's Second Amendment rights, they're not going to vote for that. And so if you can have Wall Street banks collude to deny funding to people that own, say, gun stores, then you can attack the Second Amendment through the back door. So our threats to freedom are far beyond just what government may or may not do. And in Florida, we have fought these people in every avenue. We have fought woke in corporate America. We have fought woke in our education system. We have fought woke in the halls of the legislature. We've made our state the place where woke goes to die, and we're very proud of that. So now, some people say, oh, who cares about woke? Some people say, what does it even mean or whatever? I mean, it's basically cultural Marxism. They're trying to tear at the fabric of our society, reject merit and achievement, and ultimately reject the truth itself. So there's value in fighting the fight against the woke in terms of the battle of ideas, because I think your society needs to be rooted in truth. Don't tell me that a man can get pregnant and force me to believe that, because I will not, because it's not true. So you've got to be rooted in the truth, because the truth will set you free, but it also has an impact on people's lives. If you allow the economy to be overtaken by woke agendas like ESG, the average person in our country will be poorer as a result of that happening. If woke takes over education even more than it has, you will have indoctrination, and the average student will be dumber as a result of that happening. When woke overtakes things like the criminal justice system in cities like San Francisco, what ends up happening? You have people defecating on the sidewalk using drugs and crimes committed with impunity. The average person ends up less safe as a result of that. Every single place in this country where woke ideology has been put into practice, whether it's a city like San Francisco, a state like Illinois, they have failed. They have driven people away. They have destroyed the quality of life. And if this is able to continue to spread unabated throughout our country, it will destroy the United States of America. And we're not going to let that happen. When I get in there, we will leave woke ideology in the dustbin of history where it belongs. They had mentioned serving in the military, and it was something that I felt that I should do to pitch in after 9/11. We didn't have a draft, only so many people, and so we did. So served in Iraq. We did all this other stuff, and it was something that I was proud of. Wearing the uniform, you feel like you're part of something that's meaningful. I know a lot of veterans feel that way. How many veterans do we have here? We got a lot of veterans? Okay, good. Navy, there you go. Got Marines, okay. So thank you for your service. And one of the things I noticed in the military, one of the questions you'd always get asked is, did your parents serve? Because there is family tradition where generations of Americans serve in the same families. And now we're in a situation where a lot of these veterans are coming up to me saying, I don't know that I want my kids or grandkids joining today's military. Why? Because they're taking their eye off the mission, and they're focusing on things like social experimentation, ideology, woke agenda, pronouns, drag queens, all these in our own military. Are you kidding me? So we're going to be down in the Columbia area tomorrow. We're going to be unveiling an agenda, and it's going to be very, very substantial. And we'll go over all that tomorrow, but rest assured, I can tell you this. The agenda in a nutshell is this. On January 20th, 2025, as Commander-in-Chief, I'm ripping all the woke out of the military, and I'm getting focused back on mission accomplishment. We need morale to go up. We need recruiting to rebound. We need to make this something that people want to join again, and we will get that done. Final thing I'll say, and then I'll throw it around the room a little bit. We desperately need to reconstitutionalize the government of the United States. We do not have a government that functions the way our founding fathers envisioned. They did not envision 4 branches of government where you have a 4th branch, this administrative state, that wields its power with impunity over the rest of us, that is not held constitutionally accountable, and that violates people's rights, and enacts policies about what kind of car you can drive, what kind of energy you can use. I mean, things like taking away gas stoves they want to do. In Florida, we made gas stoves tax-free, so you know where we stand on that. But that's not how these people think. So you have all these important issues in society being decided by bureaucrats who are not elected, who are not accountable. And so it's been a massive transfer of power from we the people to this permanent bureaucracy. And that's not the way this government was designed. So when you look at how government agencies have been weaponized, that is a direct result of not holding anybody accountable. The founding fathers understood if power could just be exercised without accountability, human nature being what it is, they are going to abuse their power. And so what you're seeing when you have a separate standard of justice for Hunter Biden compared to a pro-life activist, that is these people wielding power against people they don't like in a disfavorable way. And look, if Hunter were a Republican, he would have been in jail years ago, and we all know that. So, as president, it'll be my mission to end the weaponization of government. We will make sure that these bureaucrats are held accountable. These are not independent agencies. They report to the President of the United States. You will have a new FBI director on day 1. I'm not confused about what needs to be done there. You're going to see the DOJ cleaned out. We're going to take pieces of the bureaucracy and put it in other parts of the country. Can't have it all in D.C. We'll send it to Arkansas and Iowa and anywhere you want. You all want something, we can send you. Maybe we'll send you the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. But we're going to break it up in D.C. We're going to order all secretaries, cabinet secretaries, to reduce the number of employees in D.C. by 50%. And we will take action as president to personally hold people accountable. If you have a bureaucrat like Dr. Fauci, you do not coddle people like Dr. Fauci. You bring Fauci in, you sit him down, and you say very clearly, you're fired. So we've got a lot more to do, and there's a lot of work to be done. But here's the thing. None of this stuff matters if we don't win. We can't continue to lose elections as Republicans and squander all these opportunities like we have in these last few elections. You got to actually win, and then you also have to have a plan to get it all done. And I think the thing you can know about me, and even my critics in Florida would acknowledge that when I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it. I don't make promises and then not deliver. Most of the time you vote for people to office, they overpromise and they underdeliver. That's pretty much the story of how people do politics. Well, what I've done, I made big, bold promises. We had a big, bold agenda, but I over-delivered on my promises because I think it's very important that we're actually bringing all this stuff into a landing. So we will do that, and we will have a plan on day 1 to get all of this done, and I'm not going to waste any time. I mean, we're going to get in there January 20th and buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a great ride. We're going to have a lot of energy in the executive. The media is not going to be able to keep up with us. The left's not going to be able to keep up with us. We're just going to go issue after issue. We're going to have all the executive orders ready. We're going to have all the legislation that we want ready to submit to Congress. We're going to have thousands of people ready who are going to serve in the administration. We're not just going to cycle people in from D.C. We're going to bring people from outside of the country who are on a mission to return this government back to we the people. And that's what we have to do. So we have a responsibility to get this done. We're not getting a mulligan on 2024. If the Democrats win, I believe they will pack the U.S. Supreme Court with liberal justices, erasing the conservative majority we have now. They will eliminate voter ID in every jurisdiction in this country. They will make D.C. a state, and they will eliminate the Electoral College. They're playing for keeps. They want to be in power, and they expect us to basically just grin and bear it and not have voice in our nation's affairs. And so if we don't get our eye on, if we take our eye off the ball, if we get distracted, then that could happen. I believe that if this election is a referendum on Biden's failures, and if we offer a positive alternative, we're going to win, and we're going to win big. If we allow this election to be about other issues or distractions or anything like that, then I'm afraid the Democrats are going to do it, and we're going to end up complaining and stuff like we have over these last several election cycles. So we can't let that happen. And I'm motivated because I've got kids. You guys have kids, grandkids. We don't want to be the first generation that's left America less free and less prosperous than the generation before us. And yet we're on the trajectory to that. This country is in decline. And if you want somebody, and some of these Republicans, in my judgment, you know, all they're offering is that they will manage the decline of this country a little bit better than the Democrats. If that's what you want, I'm not your guy. I'm here running for president to reverse the decline of the country. We need a new birth of freedom in this country. And with your help and God's help, we will get it done. No more excuses. We will win, and we will deliver. Thank you all. God bless you. Does anyone have anything for the good of the order? Anybody have anything for the good of the order? Who do we got? Anybody? Okay.
I want to say that I'm a rising ninth grader. I'm coming from Branks Trail Middle School, and I'll be going to Catawba Ridge High School. I did want to mention that when Obama...
You look like you're in college. Wow.
Thank you. I did want to say that when Obama was elected president and Michelle was his wife, she did come up with a program called Let's Move to try to get healthier lunches in our school. But what I've noticed is kids these days don't even eat their lunch. They just throw it out, and it's unhealthy. We have all these vegetables. We have canned oranges. We have pizza that was probably frozen and just heated up for us. And I see kids eating Takis with all this red food dye. I see kids just drinking 5 apple juices, trading off their lunches.
How do you handle your lunch? What do you do?
I pack mine. I take mine to school. But I'm just wondering, is there anything that can be done about that to ensure that we have healthier lunches and that students can have more options, not only like just few choices and throwing it out and disregarding it?
It's a great question, and honestly, I think it's something that has much broader implications than just kids at school. I mean, in terms of our society and the health and everything. And what I think we will do is kind of, we've done some of this in Florida. We want to promote healthy lifestyles. One of the things I did during COVID was everyone was saying, like, you had to be in your house the whole time. And what I said was, go play golf, go fish, go boat, go walk, go run. All the media, they were so upset about this. But the reality is people were out, they were getting exercise, and they were healthier as a result. So I think a combination of exercise and nutrition, both in schools, but then just generally. What I don't want to do, though, is have the federal government come and try to force you to make choices. I think you give people the information. Let them know, what's in store. But I definitely think if you look at our society now compared to like 40 years ago, it's changed in terms of the health and the well-being. We've actually had in the last 5 years a pretty steep decline in life expectancy. And that may not be necessarily related to diet as much. It may have something to do, some of it, unfortunately, is all these drug overdoses. So it's been, and maybe some other things that I know people are looking at. So we do need to do better on health. But I think we would do it in a way that would empower people to make those decisions. I don't want the federal government coming down. And honestly, The federal government in the past, remember they used to do the food pyramid. They said, don't eat fat, eat all the carbs. No, the carbs will make you fat too. And so they were wrong about that. And so I think we got to be honest. And all these agencies, CDC, NIH, FDA, they need to be cleaned out. These agencies failed during COVID. They lied to the American people about all these different issues. We need a reckoning on all of that. Because it hurt a lot of people. And for the FDA to do an emergency approval of a COVID mRNA shot for a 6-month-old baby, there was no basis to approve that. So there's going to be a huge reckoning that takes place, because if we don't have a reckoning with all these people and we have something like COVID in the future, they are going to do the same thing that they did last time that failed. They hurt people. They cost people jobs and businesses. They hurt kids' education in these urban areas where they were locked out of school for a year. They hurt people by trying to force them to take a vax that they didn't want. It was a massive, massive incursion on our freedoms, and it can never happen in this country ever again. No, I did. I said what we don't want to do is we don't want to be forcing changes to schools and dictating. So we will promote what would be good. Obviously, we want it to be cost effective, but it's going to be giving school districts, it's going to be giving individual Americans the best information so that they can make appropriate choices. It's not going to be dictated by Washington.
Israel is one of our best allies in the Middle East, the only democracy there. Our current administration has taken a pretty antagonistic approach with them. What is your plan to establish Israel and our relationship with them?
Day one, Biden's policy to Israel is thrown in the garbage. We are going to reestablish a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. We are going to be working well with people like Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We are going to continue to recognize and make sure that Biden's not allowed to water down that Jerusalem is the eternal and indivisible capital of the state of Israel. And we are going to make sure that we are supporting their efforts to defend themselves and opposing things like boycott, divest, and sanction of Israel, where you have companies and countries that look around the world, and the only place they want to protest is this one tiny little country, the only Jewish state in the world. I think that's anti-Semitism, and it's wrong. Look, we have a strong relationship because our society ultimately traces back to what happened in the Holy Land thousands of years ago. We're a civilization based on Judeo-Christian values. And having a strong U.S.-Israel relationship, it's good for our security, good for economics, but there's also the strong bond of shared culture and shared heritage. And we are not going to let the Iranians get away with murder. We are not going to be giving them sanctions relief. We are going to hold them accountable. As somebody that served in Iraq, I can tell you they were responsible for killing hundreds, if not over 1,000, U.S. service members during those tough days in Iraq. And so Iran is an enemy of the United States, and they would like nothing better than to wipe Israel completely off the map. Israel has every right to defend itself against a very hostile force in the Middle East, and we will stand with them when they do that.
Yes, sir. I was invited to come today to listen to you by this gentleman, Representative Moss. I'm a very hardcore Trump supporter, but I know he made me stop and think a minute, because my love for President Trump comes from all the despair, all the things that he's been through, has served as our President of the United States, and he did a good job. But all the things, I'm thinking more with my heart and my sorrow and my love for him and for this country. But now this is the most important vote that we're going to have. And I have to think more with my mind and what's best for this country. And you did an excellent job, and I certainly appreciate it.
God bless you. Thank you. And I appreciate that. And, I agree with you. I appreciate what President Trump did. How they treated him with things like Russia collusion was a disgrace. And he was treated wrong. He was treated in ways that were unconstitutional. But here's the thing. The question for us now is, what are we going to do about it? And we need to end the weaponization of government. I will get that done. It's not about me. It's about you. It's about me standing up for you and standing up for this Constitution and restoring this country to what the Founding Fathers envisioned. And we will get it done. We will be focused, we will be disciplined, and we will make it happen. So thank you for that, and God bless you. Yes, ma'am. Oh, you already asked. See, okay, right here.
Thank you for coming, first of all. Obviously, there's a year and a half before January 20th, 2025, so things can change, and there's certain things that you probably shouldn't talk about given OPSEC. What is your ideal end game in Ukraine?
The ideal end game is a sustainable peace that doesn't reward aggression. But I think what you're looking at now is the D.C. foreign policy elite. They're basically saying, well, we can't really tell you when we're going to have accomplished the mission. We can't really tell you what the end goal is. And look, I think if you look at the failures of our foreign policy elite over these many decades, at the root of it is that they do things without a concrete definition of victory. That's what happened in Afghanistan. That's why we were there for 2 decades. It's what happened in Iraq because we said WMD, then we said it was about democracy and this and that. And so my fear is that they are basically signing up for a multi-year quagmire. A lot of people are going to die. A lot of treasure is going to be squandered. And there's not really going to be any change in outcome. Here's what I think that we need to be doing. A lot will change, you're right. Certainly in that area you could have things that happen. But here's something that's not going to change. Today and on January 20th, 2025, the top threat to this country is the Chinese Communist Party. That is without question. And what I see our foreign policy elite doing is they're taking their eye off that ball. They're under the delusion with people like Janet Yellen saying, oh, we're having a friendly competition. We're competitors. No, China has serious ambitions under President Xi. They've spent the last several decades. Remember, the D.C. elites, what did they do? They said if you put China in the World Trade Organization, if you grant them most favored nation status, that, yeah, they would get wealthier, but then they would become more democratic and more peaceful. And so what you've had is China, they're now the dominant manufacturing power in the world. Some of our manufacturing has been totally decimated in pockets in this country in ways that have been really bad, not just economically, but it's created despair in many communities around this country. And we were sold basically a bill of goods because China has used that money. They have built the second strongest military in the world, and they have designs not just on Taiwan, other places in the Pacific, and either here in the Western Hemisphere. And yet, we're running out of ammunition. We're running out of weapons stocks. We don't potentially even have what we would need to respond to some contingency in the Asia Pacific. And so here's how these people think. The only thing they recognize is hard power. If you have the ability to project power in their backyard, they will respect that, and they are not going to want to mess with that. And my fear is under Biden, we're proceeding in a way that there's a lot of weakness. It's inviting more Chinese aggression, and we are on a path, not like today or next week, but we're on a path where we could end up fighting and losing a war against China. The best way to avoid that is to take the threat seriously, to ensure our military is back in line and that we have what we need to be able to work with our allies in the region to deter Chinese aggression. If you look at how weak we are abroad now and all these cultural problems at home, if we don't get our act together, 25 years from now, school children in this country are going to be forced to learn 37 different pronouns in Mandarin, and we cannot let that happen. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. All right. Hello. Thank you for being here today. I have a question. I'm going to read it because I prepared it. The president said under Operation Warp Speed is ushering a new wave of mRNA vaccines for RSV and influenza. This technology hasn't been properly studied because of Operation Warp Speed. We've learned from COVID vaccines that this gene therapy crosses into the blood-brain barrier and into vital organs. We're seeing all-cause mortality rates up at wartime rates. And we're seeing turbo cancers from this technology. Would you be willing or to consider a 5 to 7 year moratorium on all mRNA vaccines until long-term safety studies have been done once before COVID, when we used to do it that way?
Well, we are absolutely going to restore safety to all this stuff with the vaccines. And I think one of the things that we've done over the years, they develop these things and then you can't sue for any side effects. So their incentive is not to create the safest product because they know they're going to get liability protection. So their incentive is to rush as much out to market as they can. Here's what we're doing in Florida. I have the ability as governor to convene what's called the statewide grand jury. So the statewide grand jury is now seated in the state of Florida. They're hearing testimony. And what they're basically trying to determine is, what misrepresentations and lies were made about the mRNA COVID shots. Because remember, when they first got rolled out, they said they were 100% effective. You were told if you took it, you would not get COVID. And they wouldn't even let you discuss any type of side effects. And here's why that's a problem. You all watch TV. What's the number one type of commercial you see? Pharma, right? And the pharma ad, if it's a 30-second ad, the first 15 seconds, it'll be a couple, usually in like their mid-60s, smiling, hugging. Aren't you glad that you have this drug? Yada, yada, yada. And then the final 15 seconds is you could die, have a stroke, heart attack. And they list all the potential things. And yet you're telling me on an mRNA shot that there was nothing that could happen? So Florida is doing that. We're the only state in the country that is trying to get the truth on it. And my Surgeon General did an analysis in Florida, and he looked at how this affects things like myocarditis. And we saw a 88% increase in myocarditis for men between 18 and 40 who were taking the booster shots. Now, maybe there's another explanation for it, but man, that's a pretty powerful piece of data. And one of the things that really bugs me about this whole thing with COVID. So you have, obviously people die normally in life. It's part of life, right? Well, they measure that, and they kind of know what the normal amount of mortality in society would be. So when COVID hit, you had what was called excess mortality. More people died than would normal in 2020 because of COVID. And so that was probably to be expected. They roll out the COVID jabs, and the thought was between natural immunity and the shots, you would basically eliminate excess mortality. And yet today, excess mortality has not budged. It's still abnormally high. So the question is why did that happen? Why have we had basically 3 years of excess mortality? And what is the reason for that? That's one of the reasons we want to clear out all these agencies, these health agencies, because they have not been honest with the American people about any of this, and you deserve honesty.
Governor, welcome to the best city in South Carolina. We're glad you're here. So, like the lovely young lady here, I voted for the Republican candidate in 2016, and also the 4 voting members of our family voted for him again in 2020. So 2 questions. Tell us how you differentiate yourself from the other leading candidate for those of us that supported Donald Trump. And also tell us how you can secure that election.
All right, so the second part about securing the election is very important. So in Florida, I oversaw the 2020 election, and then I ran in the 2022 election. I didn't let them do anything. I didn't let them cheat. We had ban on ballot harvesting, a ban on Zuckerbucks, voter ID. We had everything that you would want. We didn't change the rules during COVID. We ran a good election, and we count 10 million, 12 million votes by midnight on election night, and we report the results. It's transparent. You know what's going on. In Florida, what we actually do, and this is neat, so, we do have early in-person voting. I'd be fine doing it just on Election Day, but that's been there. It's popular. And then we don't have mass mail balloting, but you can request an absentee ballot. So if you request it, like all this is public record, so we know you requested it. When you return it in, we know you turned it in. So on every day during the election, you know how many mail ballots were returned, how many people voted early in person, Republican, Independent, Democrat, and I know if you voted. I don't know who you voted for because they don't count it yet. So you're keeping this running tally, and then all through Election Day, every 15 minutes, the supervisors in every county have to update voter turnout, how many people. 7 o'clock, it stops. We know how many people actually voted. So they can't find 50,000 additional votes because it's closed. We know that number, and that's at the end of it. That's how you have to do elections. Now, not every state does it that way. So I am not going to sit here and fight with one hand tied behind my back. If Nevada has ballot harvesting, I am ballot harvesting. I'm not going to whine about it. I'm not going to say you shouldn't have it. Of course you shouldn't have it. But if it's there, we've got to take advantage of that. If you have Zuckerbucks, I don't think you should have it. We banned it in Florida. We're doing it. So Nevada, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, maybe Georgia, they've done a little bit better on that. Arizona, we're going to have all those operations in place. I'm not ceding an inch to the Democrats on any of this stuff. We're going to have the best lawyers ready to go, and we're going to leave no stone unturned. The good thing about it is when you prepare like that, because we did all this in Florida, when you prepare like that, you probably aren't going to end up needing it because we're going to win convincingly. We're going to win independents. We're going to win all these people, and that's that. First part of the question about what differentiates, I think a couple things. There's certain objective differentiators, right? Like, I am eligible to serve 2 terms as your president. I think that's really important because if you think about the President Trump's term and you look at all the things that were positive that were done, almost all of those were reversed by Biden on day one. The court stuck. There was a couple things for sure, but almost all the other stuff was reversed. And so if you don't have 2 terms, I don't think this stuff sticks. I don't think you can slay definitively the administrative state if you don't have 2 terms to make that stick. Because if you do it over one, they're going to come in and they're going to wait you out. So the 2 terms, I think, is very important to be able to cement these structural changes. So that's one thing. The other thing is I was somebody, my job wasn't to criticize when I disagreed with him. I agreed with most of what he did, of course, and I support him. If there was a disagreement, I just was quiet about it because why do I want to criticize him when everyone else is criticizing him? So my job was always, I felt, to support him and try to be positive. But I will say I was very disappointed in 2020 when he did not fire Dr. Fauci. And I would have done that. His explanation for it was initially he used to say, if you fire Fauci, there'd be a firestorm because the media and the left would get upset. Of course they would get upset. They have a spasm every time I roll out of bed in the morning. That's not a reason to not do what's right. And I just thought that Fauci by June, July of 2020 was so wrong. He was attacking Florida for being open. He was trying to have schools closed. He eventually moved to try to force vax. He was doing things that clearly were damaging the country. And, what I told people in Florida, because, I worked really hard for him in Florida, and some of them were upset about it. Look, he's going to do it. He's just going to probably wait till the election's over. And I would have done it as soon as possible. I would not have waited to the election because I think leadership is not worrying about the blowback. Leadership's doing what's right. Nevertheless, I said he's going to do it after the election. The election happens, and he didn't do anything for Fauci. And in fact, January 19, 2021, his last day in office, he gave Anthony Fauci a presidential commendation. That was a punch in the gut, I think, to me, who fought Fauci's lockdowns, who fought to have kids in school, and I know it was a punch in the gut to Republicans across the country who had suffered under some of those lockdowns. And at the end of the day, I mean, you know, if you say you're going to slay the deep state, you didn't do it in 4 years. And that's just, I think everybody has to agree, he did not drain the swamp. That's just the reality. The swamp got the best of him. And look, there was a lot that he had to deal with. I'm not saying that, but it didn't get drained. But if you're not willing to admit you should have fired Fauci, well, how the heck are you going to drain this going forward? Fauci is like the swamp dweller number one that you would need to get rid of. So that's a huge, huge difference between the two of us. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, this is going to be the final question right here.
Sorry. I think we gotta catch a flight.
Hi. Where? Right here.
Oh, okay.
My son is active duty in the Navy. He is deployed right outside of China. He's deployed right outside of China. Can you give me more details on how you plan to handle China?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank him for his service. And what's his specialty?
Fire control ages.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's important. I'll tell you what. That's what goes on a Navy ship is pretty impressive. So at the end of the day, our job is to have a strong America, project strength, work with our allies in the Asia Pacific, so that a Xi Jinping is going to look at that, and he is going to know that's not anything you mess with. I'm not sure that we're at that point now. I'm confident if we keep on this trajectory, we're definitely not going to be at that point. President Reagan had it right with peace through strength. Ronald Reagan was president for 8 years. He deployed U.S. troops once in 8 years to Grenada, which was a very quick operation. Why? Because he was strong. People knew that he would follow through, and they didn't want to mess with him. And we have gotten away from that over the years, and so we will reestablish that Reagan-type doctrine, but I will prioritize China as the top threat to this country. Our foreign policy elite in Washington does not do that. They think they're still stuck in a post-World War II mindset where they think Europe and NATO is the most. Now, look, NATO's important. They're allies, fine. But you cannot honestly look at the threats to this country and say anything even approaches China. And it's not just the military deterrence. We need economic independence from China. They have so much stuff that we depend on now. It's put us in a vulnerable situation. We need to bring that industry back. We're probably not going to get everything, but we need the key things for our economy. It's got to be brought here. And we need more advanced manufacturing. And we also need to look at the cultural influence that the CCP has in our own society. I mean, they have an ability to call up a Hollywood studio exec and have them censor movies just at the behest of the Chinese regime. They put things in our universities like Confucius Institutes. We ban them in Florida, but they're in other parts of the country. They fund research in our universities. They steal our trade secrets. They're trying to get farmland. In Florida, we banned the purchase of farmland by all land in Florida by the CCP. We need to do that nationwide. So I think it's a full spectrum approach, and I think we need to get serious about them as being a top adversary. So listen, I'm going to be down in Columbia tomorrow. I'll be the first candidate to officially file paperwork to participate in the South Carolina Republican primary. So we're looking forward to that. And then we're going to be rolling out our military policy to get the wokeness out. So please follow us and take a look at that. But in the meantime, I just want to say I'm asking for your support when we have the South Carolina primary. I think if we win South Carolina, we are going to be the Republican nominee for president. And here's what I can promise you this. I know it's not easy. The media is going to be against you. The left's going to do all this stuff. I will get the job done. I'm not going to make any excuses. I will get the job done. And on January 20th, 2025, if you all want to take a trip up to Washington, D.C., you will see me on the west side of the Capitol with this hand on the Bible, right hand in the air, swearing the oath to be the 47th President of the United States. Thank you all. God bless you.